Intro to HTML for Lightning Web Components. You already know HTML. This is the framework layer sitting on top of it that breaks your first component anyway. Here's the big idea. An LWC template file is standard HTML5. No special syntax for tags, attributes, or nesting. What makes it an LWC template instead of a static HTML file is a small set of framework-recognized directives written as regular-looking attributes, plus one structural rule the compiler enforces before your component even builds. Every LWC has its own HTML file, sitting alongside the JavaScript and CSS. MyComponent.html, MyComponent.js, MyComponent.css, same folder, same base name. Everything inside that HTML file has to be wrapped in a single root template tag. That's the entry point the compiler looks for. Here's the basic skeleton: a template tag, one root div inside it, and a bound property. This is the rule that catches almost everyone the first time. A template can hold as much nested structure as you want, but directly under the template tag, there must be exactly one top-level element. Two sibling elements at the root level will not compile. Invalid on the left, two root-level siblings, a heading and a paragraph, directly under template. Valid on the right, the exact same content, wrapped in one containing div. One root element per template. The compiler needs a single, unambiguous root node to attach the component's shadow DOM boundary to. It isn't being arbitrary, it genuinely can't resolve two roots. Data binding basics. Curly braces bind a JavaScript property from your component's class straight into the template. No special import, no directive, just the property name in braces, and it stays in sync automatically. Here's a binding example. A greeting property in the JavaScript class, rendered directly into a paragraph in the HTML with curly braces. Conditional rendering. Instead of a ternary expression embedded in markup the way JSX allows, LWC templates render conditionally through directives written directly on the elements involved. LWC, if, LWC, elseif, and LWC, else. Here's the pattern: a loading state, an error state, and a default success state, chained with LWC, if, LWC, elseif, and LWC, else. Only one branch renders at a time, evaluated top to bottom. Why not just use JSX like React? LWC is built on the W3C Web Component standard, not a proprietary virtual DOM library. Real HTML templates mean a compiled LWC becomes a native custom element the browser understands directly, no extra runtime library required to interpret it, and no dependency on the React ecosystem to run. Loops with for, each. It iterates over an array from your JavaScript class, exposing the current item and index through for, item, and for, index. Here's a for, each example, a list of contacts from the JavaScript class, rendered as list items, each one bound to the contact's name. The second rule that trips people up: every element rendered by for, each needs a key attribute holding a unique, stable value, usually a record ID. Skip it. An LWC throws an error rather than silently guessing which DOM node maps to which array item. For, iterator, when you need to know whether the current item is first or last in the list, for adding a divider between rows, but not after the last one. Iterator gives you that directly without manual index math. Event binding in templates. DOM events bind to handler methods in your JavaScript class the same way property binding works. Curly braces, this time on an on attribute, pointing to a method name. Here's an event binding example. A button with an on-click attribute pointing straight to a handle-click method defined in the JavaScript class. A few patterns you'll rebuild constantly: a loading, error, success three-way branch using LWC. If, LWC, elseif, LWC, else. A list with an empty state, for, each plus an LWC, if checking array length. And a dynamic class binding from a computed getter in your JS class. One required root element, curly brace binding, 3 conditional directives, 2 looping directives, and a key requirement that exists for a real technical reason. Get comfortable with these, and the rest of LWC template work is mostly composition, not new syntax. Full written breakdown, with every code example, is on realsyllabus.com.